The President is going to seize this opportunity by leading the most significant tax reform legislation since 1986 and one of the biggest tax cuts in the American history.
Under the Trump plan, we will have a massive tax cut for businesses and massive tax reform and simplification.
This isn't going to be easy.
We are determined to move this as fast as we can and get this done this year.
We will be attacked from the left and we will be attacked from the right. But one thing is certain. I would never, ever bet against this president. He will get this done for the American people.
Well, White House briefing filled with economic analysis of the president's tax reform plan. Some bullet points here of what it looks like now. The details yet to be filled in. But basically, cut the number of income tax brackets from 7 to 3, 35, 25, 10. Right now, the current top rate is 39.6. Double the standard deduction that Americans can use to reduce their taxable income. Reduce corporate tax rate from 35% to 15%. Repeal the AMT, alternative minimum tax, and the estate tax, also known as the death tax, and end the 3.8% tax on investment income that was imposed by Obamacare. Here's what Democrats said today.
If the president's plan is to give a massive tax break to the very wealthy in this country, a plan that will mostly benefit people and businesses like President Trump's, that won't pass muster with we Democrats.
And there's where we begin. Let's bring in our panel tonight. Steve Hilton is a former advisor to British Prime Minister David Cameron. Susan Page, Washington bureau chief at USA Today, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Steve, welcome back. First, before I get you on tax reform, your thoughts on 100 days. We are obsessed about this 100-day thing, but just your thoughts about President Trump in this environment.
Look, I think that it's clearly a mixed picture. To put it mildly, I think that, in my view, he squandered a really massive opportunity to be that different kind of leader, the real change maker that was going to shake up Washington and cut through party lines. And I think the way he started really set him back. Having said that, there are clear accomplishments. Paul Ryan listed them today at his press conference. There have been measures implemented to deregulate business and so on that have, I think, will make a real difference. And I think perhaps the most surprising thing in terms of the expectations is that actually he's done better on the national security front than on the domestic front. People were really concerned about his leadership on the international stage. How would we deal with all the leaders, and would he be this crazy person running around destabilizing the world? Actually, he's been surprisingly reassuring to a lot of people on the international front.
And for leaders to get things across the finish line with their legislatures or parliament, it's a different challenge than being a businessman and dealing with things in your scope.
Well, you can say that again. The point about the real difference is about the fact that you've got to bring people with you. You can't just issue a decree and expect that to bring about the real change that I think this country needs. Of course, he has been doing that to a certain extent with the executive orders, that's fine. But the really deep structural changes we need for our economy to really deal with the issues that have been unaddressed for decades, really, in terms of the way the school system isn't working, the way productivity in the economy has been flat, and so that's why people's incomes aren't going up. These are really big long-term issues. And actually, you need people to work together. And that was the big hope, that he would be different, less ideological, able to work with others in a sort of pragmatic, problem-solving way. And so far, we haven't seen enough of that.
I think the jury's still out, obviously, Susan, because he has plans to do things. This tax reform, as it's laid out, your thoughts about this?
Well, I think there is a consensus that we need to have simpler taxes, and that there's a need for a corporate tax deduction. I think there's some groundwork laid for that could be productive. I think when you look at this particular plan, there's some things that are going to have very hard going, and hard going not just with Democrats. Obviously, Democrats have been pretty much opposed to what President Trump has proposed generally, but among Republicans who are concerned about the deficit, for one thing, because this is, unless you really believe in dynamic scoring, this is a tax plan that looks like it would increase the deficit considerably and have trouble meeting the standard of revenue neutrality that you need to use reconciliation as your device to get it passed.
In the Senate, 51 votes. Charles.
Look, I think the most important element of this is the stripping away of deductions. In 1986, that was the great triumph of the tax reform. It stripped away all these loopholes and paybacks and cutouts, essentially a form of corruption. And I think the appeal that a Republican can make to Democrats is this meets the fairness argument, because it's only the rich, it's only the powerful who have the lawyers and the accountants who can exploit these cutouts, and anybody else can't use them. And I think by doing that, you're allowed to lower rates. That was the genius of the Reagan tax reform. As I read it now, it's only an outline, so we don't know if it'll end up this way. But except for the mortgage interest rate deduction, which you can hardly touch, although you can probably cap it because so many people depend on it, and the charity, which I think is very useful, because it's actually the only time the government weakens itself and strengthens civil society. It allows, essentially, it subsidizes your charitable giving to independent organizations, which is very healthy for the country. Except for those two exceptions, it seems as if they want to strip away everything else. The problem with tax reform is whenever you do that, as we did in '86, over the next 3 decades, the barnacles accumulate when all the powerful end up with their new cutouts and deductions, and you've got to clean it away. And if it can do that, if this tax reform can do that, that'll be a triumph.
You know, this is what Simpson-Bowles tried to do, and this is the commission set up by President Obama to incorporate not only entitlement reform but tax reform altogether. And they had a consensus, Republicans and Democrats. They just didn't have the administration. I mean, if this president reached out to Simpson-Bowles and said, let's do the big thing, that would be changing.
It would, and actually, this, going back to the point about the 100 days, the other really big point is that the #1 job that President Trump was elected to do, I think we'd all agree, is get the economy moving, more jobs, higher incomes. That was the real force behind his campaign and his election, and it should have been the #1 item on his agenda. That's what he should have started with. So this plan today, I think, on the face of it, is in a simple phrase, great, but late. And now he's got less opportunity to get that collaboration on it because of the way he began. Now, I think the other point about the plan that's really...
He did have a little bit of a pushback from Democrats from the beginning. I mean, it was a lot of Russia, and there was a lot of Democrats weren't signing on to anything, so why not just go through what you want?
Well, I think what he should have wanted first is action to get the economy moving. And the key to that, actually, is business confidence, so that decisions are made to invest, to create jobs. And that's why, actually, the really important part of today for me is the corporate tax cut. And one aspect of that I think we really need to focus on is the rate. There's a sort of tendency, I think, today to say, well, it's just a negotiation. He wants 15, Paul Ryan wants 20. It doesn't really matter. I actually heard Paul Ryan a few weeks ago on an interview say it's just math. It really isn't. If you want that stimulative effect on business confidence, it's got to be dramatic. 20% doesn't actually put America in the international competitiveness rankings looking that favorable. But 15% really does. That will really give you that whoosh of confidence. And so for me, I think, going back to the point about who benefits from this, if it's 20% or a bit higher, the real winners from that will actually be the already rich. If you really want to help working people, you've got to go for that 15% rate.
Yeah, you just have to figure out how to make it revenue neutral, and that's the challenge, as you talked about. Susan, quickly, as you look at our Fox News polls, the president's job performance, which is Fox Poll 1, 45% disapprove, 48%. If we can go to Fox Poll 8, this is the president's handling of a list of issues. And on ISIS, terrorism, and the economy, he has an approval above disapprove in this poll. Immigration, foreign policy, taxes, and health care, he's upside down.
Yeah, as Steve was saying, it's just been a surprise that he's done better on national security issues than on domestic ones. Part of that, I think, is because of the team that he now has around him, which has earned some credibility, and he's listened to them. So he's changed positions, or changed sometimes in big ways and sometimes in nuanced ways on foreign policy. So that is unexpectedly an area of strength for him.
A big meeting